Hello and welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm joined by Scott Homan. Scott was raised in the fiercely DIY Northwoods of Wisconsin, deep in the wild of the Great Lakes region. He and their rural musician community created Oh the Crib Records, where they recorded a few albums for their various bands. He ran camera and sound for a local news station and went to university for photography and digital media. Today, he runs Banana Island Films, which created a music documentary, Hanoi Mixtape, which you can watch at hanoimixtape.com. And Witness Underground is his sophomore documentary, which includes the Witness Underground podcast and a YouTube series, XJW, coming out. His present projects are all focused on artists escaping cults, especially musicians. So welcome, Scott. I'm so excited that you're here and we get to have this conversation today.
Thanks, Kara. I'm excited. Thanks for having me as well. Appreciate you highlighting Witness Underground.
Well, I had the privilege of watching it, and it's a really great, really deeply moving documentary talking about former Jehovah's Witness cult members, specifically artists. So there are several people who are highlighted and you tell the stories, and they all are artists. I believe also you come from the same background, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
for the audience to hear that, usually there's a lot of assumptions made that what it's like. And there is the package, the Jehovah's Witness or the cult package. Like, this is what the life is going to be like. And for most people, it's very similar. But in my case, I have a unique situation in that my dad was really going for it, trying to join and become a better member and rise in the hierarchy. And my mom was very resistant to even going and being a part of it at all. So she never really joined. So we had kind of a dual philosophy or dual worldview household and 5 kids. And they were busy, both career people. So we had quite a bit of a balance. Like, normal cult member would have only friends in that religion. And for us, it was we only have friends outside, but we're trying to find people that are our same age and befriend them. We're trying to become friends with cult members, but it wasn't very easy, and there weren't that many kids. So a little bit more of a balance just to set the frame of my experience with it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I wanted to hear what your experience was, because you are in the background. You created this film, but you're not really in it.
Right.
And so I wondered why that was. I figured there was some sort of design to that.
Part of it, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So there are a lot of different kinds of documentary styles. In the last century, there was a lot of education types of documentaries. And then there was show hosts who would talk about themselves as a documentary, and they call that a documentary. There's many styles, right? And then there's ones that are like a TV news host that would describe, look at what we're seeing here on the street, and very point of view cam style. And then there's many other kinds. And I wanted to do something that didn't have me in it, because I thought I could do a more compelling story, make a more compelling story. It wasn't about me. I wanted to do something that was deep and resonated with the voices of people who went through it, that you're going to see on camera, that you're going to see in the archival films, that you're going to listen to with their archival music, and you're going to follow their journey, humanize the cult member experience, take you on a journey of them exiting, and then how did they do it? How did they get out? How did they land on the outside?
Yes, and you do that so beautifully. And so did you not feel, from your personal experience, did you feel that you rode that same wave to any extent? Was there an extraction part where you kind of awakened out of what your dad was going through? Or
yeah, I definitely had my story's very parallel to theirs, and also contemporary. We had not only was it similar in that I made music and I was adjacent to this religion and in it to some degree in a lot of ways. I did believe quite a bit of it. They hooked me as a teenager. But some things I was very skeptical of, which they don't accept skepticism at all. It's not acceptable to be a skeptic or question anything that they teach. You just have to accept it all 100%, or you're kicked out. So I somehow rode this fine line where the people in the movie weren't really doing that. They were waking up in their own personal ways, but keeping it quiet, where I was very aggressively I don't agree with this. And I left it as a teenager, but then went back halfway. Anyway, I like to say that my film is autobiographical, in that my story is captured in there, and I told it in such a way that it's basically my experience, but theirs is captured on film and with audio, and in their coming out music, or their leaving the Jehovah's Witness experience albums that they produced, which I
Mhm.
did not do that. I didn't make I'm a tortured artist who's been oppressed by an authoritarian regime on the level of 1984 and Orwell or North Korea. I didn't make those albums. So it was like, I wanted to really focus on them. It was nice to have a separation between my experience, because it's pretty traumatic to go through something like that, a waking up thing. And anyone can go through that, not just from a cult experience. You can have that with just society. Like,
Yeah.
oh, the pattern is go to college and get a job and be a slave to in a career you hate until you retire. And then you might get to enjoy yourself in this paradise when you're in your 60s or later. Like that, when you're like, wait, I could actually do something else outside of that system. Like that could be a waking up moment for somebody.
Mhm.
That could be just as profound and have the same kind of chemical experience for you, or
Yeah.
worldview shifting experience.
Yeah,
Um,
or the government is not the helpful big brother that I thought it's not gonna save me like I thought
right,
it was,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been really surprising to have different outside perspectives. There's a lot bigger audience than just cult members for this movie, or ex-cult members. And a lot of people who've seen it at the film festivals, we went through 11 festivals, they would often respond like, "Oh, I had a similar experience with the startup world. I had a similar experience in the, fill in the blank." It could even be the healing spiritual world. Like someone could have an experience like that there, or waking up and then joining the spiritual world. And it's like everyone has a whole different way of seeing their personal experience in the
Themselves.
world and themselves.
Yeah.
I've been loving that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, awakening from anything is hard, but it is so fulfilling as well, and it can really catapult you into a new level in your life. So it's it's really helpful to see examples of people going through it and coming out the other side. And it's so important that we hear stories like that to help propel into getting into, because it takes courage, to come
Hmm.
outside and not be comfortable anymore. And your film does such a super job of painting the picture of what it is like to leave something that's been so fundamental and foundational to every aspect of somebody's life. So, in the case of the people in the film, not only were their religious beliefs shaken, so they not only have to decide, like, wait, these religious beliefs that have been foundational to the way that I have believed that the world and is constructed, and that life and afterlife is constructed, is wrong. But then they're also exiled from not only their entire community, but their families.
Hmm.
One of the people was married and said to his wife, "I don't believe this anymore." And she left, and he's never seen her again. Like, they've got
Right.
divorced, but he's never seen her in person. They have no schooling. They're discouraged from getting higher education. So the jobs that they're able to have are very limited. I think that I even remember that one person started a blog trying to disseminate why this stuff is not true and what they're being fed is wrong. And somebody came up to him who was a good friend of his while he was in Jehovah's
Mhm.
Witness, and then hadn't talked to him since. And the guy kind of whispered to him, "I've been reading your blog," or "I always read your blog," or something like that, but he's still in it, which I think was such another powerful way to show just how much courage it takes to walk out, because it's really like the whole structure of your life. There's a choice that's made where it's like, this, I have to live in the truth. This isn't truth. And I'm willing to let everything else collapse so that I can be in my truth and I can be in integrity.
Mhm.
And I just really applaud anybody who has been in that situation, but I can't imagine the torment of trying to decide if you should take that leap and reclaim your life or stay in the comfort of what you've always known. What for you was the choice point like that? It sounds like you had always been a little bit like, I don't know, I kind of yes, kind of no, but did you feel like you had to take a leap and dismantle, or because you kind of had a foot in each boat, it was not so difficult.
I had a couple moments of having to make a stand, and one of them was emotional when I was a teenager still, 19. And there's a lot of moments like that. Even that moment can be important for most people in like the American culture. Like you get out of the house, you go and do your own thing. And like, who are you? What do you love? Like, what are you focusing your time on? And I just didn't go. I moved out, went on a big trip with some high school buddies. We went skateboarding on the West Coast for a month and camping and like city stuff. We were just like seeing the world at year 2000. And then came back and I had them drop me off in Madison where I knew some also ex-witnesses. And we didn't think of ourselves that way. We were just like, oh, we're people and we know each other. And I lived with them for like half a year and worked there. And I like didn't go to church. They don't call it church, but I didn't go to their church at all during that time. And I'd read some literature that was like about shunning. And it really affected me because it was like, here's a family. It's like an elder and his wife and their kids all left the religion or did something. They broke a rule or something, but like they got completely cut off from their families. And I read this whole pamphlet about it. And I was like, wow, I know that's how it works. Like I have done that to other people in the religion, even my own cousins on my mom's side who joined the religion, and one cousin. And I didn't like that feeling. And I saw people breaking that rule secretly. And then like I had friends that got kicked out and in my own band that were like two different people, one left and one got kicked out. And it was like, they won't talk to me because they think they're not supposed to. But there would be some phone call randomly, like in a desperate moment, emotionally, like reaching out, and I would answer the phone because it didn't agree with me anyway. So I left the religion at that time period. I
Because
didn't
of
really
that
lodge it.
pamphlet or
Yeah, it affected
yeah.
me. And I was like,
Mhm.
this isn't right. Something's wrong about this thing. And it's always been wrong. And I've always seen it and had a reaction to it that was like, this isn't okay. And then I went back to it, but on my own terms. Like I had this big heart to heart with my dad about it because it's his religion, essentially.
And
He's
your
trying to
dad's
get our
still in
family.
it? Oops.
Yeah, from what I heard, I haven't talked. So I have
Oh,
a disconnection from my family, but he's now
oh,
like an elder, like at the higher ups
okay.
of the local congregation. I heard he's like the presiding overseer, which is the leader of all the elders,
Oh, wow.
which it's like so outside of his personality, but who knows who he is. They call it putting on the new personality. So like
Mm.
assume these positions of power and control and be a proper cult member. Don't be yourself. Like they call it shedding the old personality and putting on the new one. So like just tears away who you truly are and your authenticity to like become this role
It's
and
almost like you
embody
can
it.
picture like somebody at a keyboard, like, okay, let me program in who I'm going to be now. Oh,
Like what
that's
avatar
going
will I put
to,
on?
yeah, to satisfy what these people want from me.
Yeah. Do you ever see the Duncan Trussell series on Netflix? It's called
No.
Midnight Gospel.
Uh-uh.
It's so abstract and amazing. It starts out basically like there's this person in an alternate reality who's living in this sort of hilly trailer park, but inside he has this like weird AI transport device where he like sticks his head in this big thing and he like chooses a planet and like an experience and an avatar and he like is transported to this other planet and he's like a walking rainbow and like he's having a conversation with the president of that alternate reality about existentialism. Meanwhile, there's like a zombie apocalypse and it's like the most abstract, crazy
Oh
animation.
my
It's
gosh.
so good.
That
In a way, when you say like the programming or like the AI or the avatar, like in a much darker sense, like when you join a religion like this, they want to shape you into a thing, into a position, and then groom you for that. Meanwhile, if you misspeak, they will teach you the right way to speak and they'll punish you for misspeaking. People are always like trying to get into the next position above. And to do that, they push someone down or call someone out or like expose someone's missteps or sins. It's a very strange, very Orwellian, like dystopian reality.
Hmm.
And I want people to know how dangerous it is. It's a theme of the movie. Like shunning is evil and it destroys your neighbors' lives. Like it's not
Yeah.
just like some abstract thing in some other community. And there's programming and the people that are in it they're the real victims. Like the people that are in it are trapped. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm suffering from not having a relationship with my family for 15 years, 4 siblings, both parents, my grandparents, cousins,
Even
aunts and
your
uncles.
mom has shunned you?
Yeah, she's towing the line of the religion now. Like she wasn't in the past,
Really?
but now
Okay.
she's like sucked
Really?
in.
Even when it
Yeah.
comes to her own child?
This
That's a
is the
shame.
darkness of it all.
Yeah.
You'll never talk to your kids again until someone dies. That's
Wow.
disconnect completely. And they force them, they coerce them. Because if they talk to me, that's a sin against God and they might lose their access to the afterlife.
Oh my
And
goodness.
if someone turns them in or someone finds out that they're doing it, they could get kicked out and get treated that way for the rest of their life. They just put this huge wall up if they're in that religion because
Yeah.
they can't risk the immediate social ramifications of having a conversation with someone they love and to feel okay with that because it's actually like an act of hate. Like they're considered a hate group in some countries because of this
Really?
exact thing. Like in
Wow.
Belgium, they just lost their first criminal case against them by people like myself who are outside of the religion, sued the religion, and they won against the Jehovah's Witnesses. And now they're considered like a hate group in Belgium. They're banned for this exact thing in Norway. Not banned, they're defunded because the Germanic
Oh,
countries like give taxpayer money to religions. So like, they don't get
okay.
that anymore. So that's a brand
Okay.
new thing. That's really great. Iceland's working on that. Sweden's working on that. Denmark's talking about it. Germany might. There's a whole like cascading thing that's happening because of shunning. And so that's what the film is about, to bring it back.
Well, you talk about the shunning, and the people in the film do share their experiences of that. And one of the most striking things is the level of compassion that the shunned have for the people who are still in it. And you basically said it's the people who are in it and they have their reasons for it. And I understand why, and my heart goes out to them because even though this really very hurtful thing has happened from the people who are like the closest, our survival instinct is we should be able to always have a relationship with our parents. That's kind of like how our whole fabric of society works. Like you should be able to always count on the love of your parents. And
And usually they want to be in your life or like know what's
yeah,
going on with you just they're not maybe supporting you or financially like funding your
right.
existence anymore
Hmm.
or cooking you meals, but like they want to know what's going on, like interested in you
Right.
as a human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah. But the level of compassion that I was seeing with one person after another, it's a really hurtful thing that's happened, and I don't necessarily fault them for it, even though there is some responsibility. Everybody has their own responsibility, but if you're not, like, to that level where you have awakened to your free will, and you're not exercising your free will and you're still programmed, and that was a really beautiful thing, and I really highlighted the content of the character of the people who are going through it, that they could
Mhm.
still extend that.
I appreciate that about them, but I wanted to highlight, and that is the sort of the final message is like, we love these people. We don't want anything bad to happen to them. They're in a really tricky situation that we were exactly in that situation. So like we don't have to put ourselves in their shoes. We were in those exact shoes and we
Yeah.
totally have love for those people. They are doing this thing that could be regarded as hate crimes or human rights violations, but they're just individuals trying to make their own choices for their own reasons. And it just so happens that one of those choices has to be, according to their situation, never to talk to me again for the rest of their lives, even if they're my own parent or sibling. And it sucks, but at some point, it's like you have to mourn the loss of relationships that the other person in the relationship doesn't want and move forward with your life.
Or
There's nothing I can do to change how someone else acts in their life towards
yeah.
me or others. It's their own choices. Those choices suck, especially at the beginning. It's like so insulting to realize that your parents are like, I'm afraid of this uneducated person who's in a higher position than me and what they will do to my future and my like access to my God if I talk to you. So my fear is in the way of my love and I'll never talk to you again. And to have that happen as like a cohesive whole from an entire group of people that are super, super close to me my whole life is so insulting and also a bit embarrassing because it's like, don't you have any of your own agency? Or like, are you in touch with who you are, like deep down, or your own soul? Or do you have love because you're acting in fear? And then at some point, it's like, okay, this is just like their standard mode. Like they're programmed now to act this way. And they have their entire community that's still inside the faith
That's
are telling them that this
reinforcing
is
it.
the right thing to do for
Yeah.
love. This is the way to get me to come back to them through this emotional punishment, this emotional abuse structure they designed. Like this is the only way back to God for me. So they're like manipulated to act this way. So that's the dangerous thing about this cult That, and there's
Yeah.
other things that are even like illegal that they're doing, but a lot of other people are talking about that.
Really?
Or- oh
Okay,
yeah.
so I have to say, like, I didn't know any of this about Jehovah's Witnesses. I went to
Mhm.
school with some Jehovah's Witnesses, and I remember asking them their beliefs a little bit. I just remember being in drama class or something, and we had some free time, and I was like, "So what is it?" Because they had, like, even come to my house just because I was on their route, and I
Mhm.
didn't understand what was happening at that time where I opened the door. I'm like, "Oh my goodness." And I thought, like, we were gonna play or something, and I'm like, "Oh." I thought they just stopped by and then they, like, wanted to leave a pamphlet or something. I didn't even understand at that time what a Jehovah's Witness was. I just always thought it was a religion and not so far as what you're talking about. And you and I have met in person
Mhm.
briefly at a podcasting seminar, and you shared with me a little bit about the focus of your work and your podcast. And I was like, "Oh, this would be perfect for my podcast because spirituality and cults, like, those things can definitely go hand in hand." But had never understood Jehovah's Witnesses to be cults. And you gave, like, your some examples of cults that was like, "What? Like, these could be cult types of things," and they were, like, societal things. I don't know, I would love to get your definition
Oh,
of cults. Like, where do you
yeah.
see this happening outside of what we typically know of, like, white robed, like, sacrificing things and
What I've realized is that the structures are human nature on some level to build and create these kind of structures. And cults are deeply hierarchical, but we've also designed lots of hierarchies in other parts of society that everyone accepts as normal. And some of the themes, like getting shunned, is being a dangerous thing that I'm saying. It also exists even in your average corporate job. Like, you need to speak this way, act this way, dress this way, perform at this level. And if you don't, the consequences are you're out. Not only are these people are not accessible, the doorway is going to be locked, your tag won't work, your identity will be erased from our association with our group, and you'll have no access to the finances that make your life work. You can get fired, right? If you don't toe the line. So it's not so different in a
Mhm.
workplace environment. What I've been working in a startup situation. I absolutely love the startup culture, but all those elements are there. But you have to add on one new thing, which is a charismatic leader, which is like the beginning of every cult is a charismatic leader. Some guy, a visionary, someone with or a woman with an amazing view of like a brand new product or service or a business concept that like they're going to disrupt an entire industry. And people are like, that's amazing. We want to give this human being all of our money to invest in this thing. Here's the contract. Here's $17 million. Fund, get the best workers in this space possible. Make this product in 17 months or whatever, and then we're going to change the world, and we're all going to make a bunch of money. And then what happens to that charismatic leader is they're the CEO, and then after they've done all their work and they've created this product or the service, that person's out. They get booted from the CEO position. They even get booted from the board of directors half the time. And then a new person's brought in, a second person that makes this product or the service into a functional for profit business. Because the CEO can't do that. The CEO is the visionary or the founder.
Mm.
And the startup world has so many cult parallels. And the same thing, you can get kicked out, and it's like you have to walk the talk and be a positive person. And if you're not, like, you're out, because like we're all running on fumes here. It's like fake money from someone else. It's not based on real, actual providing a service to anyone yet. It might be in the future.
Mhm.
So that was really interesting to experience that firsthand from the inside. And like the cult leaders constantly like giving misinformation to their own employees. And I don't know, I found that to be so similar. And I'm a little bit like averse to groups of any kind because I start seeing these structures like instantly. Like, I'm like, that's the dark, dangerous thing right there. That person is a corporate person and they're faking it. It's so
Mhm.
obvious to me. I see it like clear as day what's happening, and like people following similar roles or putting themselves in roles or being the loudest voice in every meeting because they want to like rise up in the structure.
Mhm.
And it's just human nature. But the cults have this special like shield and protection and a way to program the minds because they have your future in the afterlife, like your eternal, like everything is controlled by them. Your access to the one holy, super universal being of the infinite galaxy or whatever, however
Mhm.
you want to see God or your version of a deity, they are your path to access that person, their way of praying, their holy book, their way of interpreting a holy book. One of the beautiful things to me was that the Jehovah's Witnesses are really, they spend a lot of time telling you why other faiths and groups and ideologies are not the path. And they intellectualize the process. So it feels like you're doing real research. And they're basically just poking holes in the way the Catholics see things, the Lutherans, and basically any other Christian group you can come up with, because most of them fall under those categories, Protestants versus Catholics. And then when it comes to Muslims, well, of course, they forgot this and they didn't accept this prophet. And then with Buddhism and Jainism and other Eastern philosophy, they poke holes in that. And then all the ancient stuff, well, those have pantheons of God. None of those gods were real, right? We're all atheists towards those gods. So all the other gods of all the other faiths are totally different false gods. And people are wasting all of their time praying to all the wrong gods, and they're never going to get anything out of that. So like when you point that lens at all those other faiths throughout your childhood, and they have books on all these religions, and they have like whole, like, here's the 17 reasons why this isn't real. Like they're like clickbaity type titles, right? Their
Oh,
books are like,
yeah.
this false god can be debunked with this book. Read it and
Yeah.
then never think about it again. And then so when you find, like, if you're having a wake up moment or a doubt, and you finally like give yourself the permission to explore that doubt or that question that you have, which they make you self police. They train you to never look at this information, never explore those doubts, ignore them, push them away. So you're like suspending your disbelief in this whole framework. And it's like as soon as you pull on one thread, the whole thing's like, oh my God,
It
the
all
framework's gone.
collapses.
It all
Yeah.
collapses. But when you point that lens at that religion, the one that they've created, that way of seeing the world, if you point it at them, the whole thing's absurd and in 100 different ways. And so when people finally like do pull on that, point on that one thing, or do that one Google search, or like read that one book they were not wanting to read, or look at Wikipedia and what it says about evolution, for example, it's like 3 paragraphs and it like, oh, that's how nature works.
Yeah.
Duh. There's hundreds of millions of people have like found evidence that this is how things happen. And they'll crumble your whole world if you read those 3 paragraphs, because you'll realize that you've been lied to this whole time. And it's not just those 3 things. There's like 70 other things you've already like just suspended for now to
Yeah.
keep your whole life working. So it takes like one Google search and people are like, my whole world is crumbling, and now I have to like live a lie to have friends and family. When you were talking about someone who's still in their religion, reading this guy's blog that we discussed in the movie, there's in the former cult member world, they have what's called physically in, mentally in. That's your standard member. They call it PMI. So it's like 4 letters, PIMI. And then you have physically in, mentally out, which is someone who is still going because they want to maintain these relationships, but they don't believe any of it, or they don't believe some of it. And that's illegal. Like you can't have thought crimes. Like they're committing the ultimate thought crime, like a kick out, a bull offense. They call it disfellowshipping. Get rid of this person offense just for thinking something different than what you're supposed to think. And that's what I'm guilty of. I'm guilty of thought crimes. And that's why I'm out
Okay.
of the religion. I actually left anyway. Then there's physically out, mentally out, which is like a fully out member. Like they don't participate. They don't think about it. They don't believe any of it. And that's been where I'm at since the day I was like, I'm done.
Okay. So for a
Yeah.
while you were in the physically in, but thoughts out. You were in that
I
middle
never
group.
really, well, I think I did that for like 9 years on some level, but it's actually, they call it, there's another one, physically and mentally questioning. So it's like PIMQ. So I was
Oh,
like
okay.
questioning since I was a teenager. I'm like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. Like, do you really think that the guy in prison who wrote Revelation Jehovah's Witnesses think that he like prophesied like a church meetup that was happening in Pennsylvania in 1918 was like the prophecy fulfillment. It's like, that doesn't really add up. That guy didn't even know those continents existed where these guys were hanging out, let alone like a convention.
Right, right.
It doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
I was always like questioning that and making
Yeah.
a scene about it. Like, you guys really believe that?
And what was the temperature that you were taking when that type of thing would come up? Did you feel alone? Did you feel like people were, I don't know, it's just what they're saying, or?
I would have conversations about it, but it was like dangerous waters to navigate, or it'd get shut
Okay.
down. They do this
Yeah.
thing where they have a whole book on like how to preach to people door to door, like your friend in high
Mhm.
school was doing, where if somebody at the door is like, I'm not interested, and you're like, you're not interested in living forever? Are you sure? And then it's like, okay, the conversation keeps going. They have like all these responses to everyone's normal reactions to disbelieving the bad advertising about getting immortality for free. So then, but when on the inside of the religion, they're doing that for people on the outside of the religion, but on the inside of the religion, they have this thing where they do thought stopping language games. Where if I'm like, do you guys really think that is true about the people meeting in Pennsylvania in 1918? They'd be like, well, what we really need to focus on here is getting into God's paradise. And it's just like, we're not going to talk about that thing. We're going to talk about like petting the lion who's going to be totally docile and like eating fruit for eternity. And
Okay,
all these
so
like weird,
redirection.
yeah,
And we're
for
not
example.
gonna, yeah, yeah. Well, I can't help but wonder how going through this experience has shaped your relationship with God or your relationship with yourself, like as you do your own self exploration and you've
Mhm.
got this kind of trauma that around specifically your spiritual being. Where does that leave you? I mean, did the baby get thrown out with the bathwater or, how has that been for you?
A lot of people that leave this particular group, like I was saying, it's already been disproven to them in some sense of
Mhm.
reasoning that all other religions aren't true or have no access to spirituality or God. So when you do that to this religion, it's like, oh, okay, so all of it's fake. All the supernatural stuff, all of the demons aren't real. Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of things about demons. Like all of that's false. And I've been in fear for no reason. Okay, so well, their gods aren't real. Then I'm an atheist towards them. Like it's so easy to just realize that like the God I've been praying to is also not real. Okay, so it's all lies. Okay, so I'm just an atheist now. That's another extra shocker. I lost my community and my family, but now I also don't have God.
Right.
Okay, so what is the meaning of life then? And then it's like a whole different personal journey. So you can easily just walk into a church and then start learning what their worldview is. And then you get to have the framework and the meaning that comes with that whole worldview. And if you don't have that framework, then you need to go create your own, but that's a lot more work, right? So like a lot of people leave this religion and there's like baseline, all the spiritual supernatural world is false. No matter what anyone says, it's noise. I need to create my own meaning in this life. And it's just a materialist world. But then it's like not really a strong identity, or it's not really a healthy identity, I don't think. And we've had a lot of discussions about that on my podcast with all these other artists who've left the cult. That being labeled as an ex Jehovah's Witness, it's like you're labeling yourself as something you're not a part of. That's
Mm.
strange. And also atheism's the same kind of language. I am identifying with a group who doesn't believe what these other people believe, is not a belief system of any kind. It's just like the lack of, the language is a bit strange and unhealthy. Ultimately, I would consider myself more of a humanist. Like I value human life and cultures around the world as equals and of value. And that's a positive framing and perspective. But then to your specific question, did I throw the baby out with the bathwater? I think it was necessary to like
Mhm.
dissolve all programming and framework that was given from this or taught or programmed from this group to rebuild from scratch. So atheism was like a great starting place
Mhm.
to live with like the clarity of there is nothing outside of this existence, but then to like have experiences that were personal and transformational for myself, and others have gone through this have said similar things. Like they have a very vast, ex-witnesses have vastly different and very interesting perspectives, which I think is healthy because it's based on real personal experience, not what some group has taught them. But I'm very, like you use the word spirituality and there's the spiritual community. I would say your podcast would very much fit in the quote unquote spirituality. It's like very vast, the kind of guests
Yeah.
you have. And that word for me has a lot of negative meaning because the religion used it as a way to say you're a spiritual person if you obey all the rules and say all the right things, wear the right clothes, and do all the preaching and do all the slavery stuff that the religion requires of you to like rise up in the hierarchy. If you're not
Mhm.
doing that, you are not spiritual. So like they
Mm.
use it as this way to like judge you all the
Yeah.
time. So that's a bit unfair to apply that to the spiritual community that exists outside of that framework. What's interesting to me is I'm living in a place right now. I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and this place has unbelievable amounts of leaders, healers, gurus, name all of the types of anyone who's been on your podcast or someone like that here in some form,
Mhm.
and they're like offering their services and their experiences. And it's really like I'm open minded to all of it and open minded to the psychedelic and the shamanic experiences. And I've done some of a little of everything. I've done Qigong. I learned meditation 10 years ago through that framework. I lived in Vietnam for 5 years. It was like I went to like essentially an atheist nation where there's no one Christian. It was amazing and got so much clarity there.
I'm
But
sure.
like also there's like Taoism and
Mhm.
Buddhism influences. And I like got into like the meditation world, and I'm a big fan of Sam Harris and his like I'm a neuroscientist, atheist, but
Mhm.
he teaches meditation. And so it's from like we don't have to talk about the supernatural ever. It's
Mhm.
your understanding your subconscious and what's going on inside you, like getting to know who you are and how your brain works, how your thoughts work. Like you're going to live and perish with this body and this mind. So you might as well get to know what's going on internal. So like I've really enjoyed that process because that was like a very clean slate, no supernatural added,
Mhm.
free supernatural beings involved.
Yeah.
Um, but I hesitate to like jump into any groups. And
Mhm.
as a free person, like I can go to a group, I can go to a temescal, I can go to an ayahuasca shamanic experience or a sound healing and like judgment free, judge it or not judge it, like take it or leave it, find benefit or not find benefit, decide if I enjoy it or not, or if I want to go back without feeling like I have to belong. And I think the spiritual community generally doesn't have those you need to join us elements,
Mhm.
which I do really appreciate. It's take it or leave it. Like we're pretty open here. I'm a little off put by to get this kind of experience, you have to pay us before you experience it. Where like churches have we want your brain and your soul we want to control you. So we'll give you free entrance to church. We'll
Uh-huh.
give you
Yeah.
dinner to like draw you into our framework because we need you more than you need us. And that's how
Mhm.
I see churches in general. Like we need you. We need your money to exist. So please come in and have a free dinner and then like you will have you
Yeah.
where spiritual world's like, hey, no, we actually want to enter the conversation about the energy exchange. Like, give me $20 or give me $100 or give me $1,000, and you'll get something out of this, and I'll get your money. And it's a strange thing to have spirituality working with capitalism. I'm used to spirituality being like a donation based system, like
Yeah.
with the church I grew up in. They do talk a lot about money, but it's pretty much like, hey, this is your soul you're talking about, or like your eternal
Mhm.
being. Like, we're not going to charge money for this. That's
Mhm.
not going to be the thing that's in the way of us communicating. And so I find that strange with the spiritual community because they kind of have to exist and to be able to do their craft they have to charge something. So I don't know, I guess I'm not sure how to tap into it in a way that's healthy, and I definitely don't want to belong, and I'm definitely not
Yeah.
wearing the outfits that they generally
Yeah.
have, which is like it's like a spiritual community is like a place of authenticity, but I feel like from an outsider looking in, I feel like I'm seeing people wearing uniforms, and so
Yeah,
that's a bit off-putting to me.
it's fascinating because, like, what you're talking about with the vastness, and there's a lot under that spirituality umbrella, but there are a lot of hooks. Absolutely, a lot of hooks that are as strong as the experiences of the Jehovah's Witnesses, where it's like, you're in, you can't get out, and there's sorcery, and even with ayahuasca ceremonies, even with, like, retreat centers, in Latin America type of, traditional. I was just on a webinar with somebody who wrote a book about this yesterday, and she was the victim of sorcery, like, went down to this well-known retreat center, did an ayahuasca ceremony, and during that ceremony, she was, like, there was an energetic dart. She was, like, hooked to this person she hadn't even paid attention to. It, like, started to destroy her marriage. They, like, had her come back down to do an unpaid internship. Anyway,
Hmm.
fascinating story, but it wasn't like even a group, it was a famous, I don't know what the name of it was, but it was a well-known, famous people go there, retreat center. And she had this very long experience that she was psychologically like couldn't get herself out of. And it took all these tribal elders of the Native American, I can't remember which tribe. Anyway, she was getting a lot of different help of like trying to address the energy of this. So it's wise to be cautious. And I can completely understand that, like, let me reorient myself to the material world, to the physical world, and like what I can trust. Like, okay, at
Mhm.
this point, like I can trust my senses. And
Mhm.
I know that people can have a lot of power over me when they start to go to things that I have to take their word for because I can't see it, or I'm relying on their interpretation of things. So that makes complete sense. And just, it sounds like you're in this sort of rebuilding time of just like, who am I and what is important to me and how can I stay centered and grounded and not be at the mercy of somebody else for my happiness, for my community, for my well-being and here and when I'm not here anymore, you know?
Yeah. There's a complicated thing that I'm working through right now, and I'm 15 years into this journey. So I was
Mhm.
describing like my initial stuff. And so
Yeah.
I've made a lot of moves since then.
Mhm.
But one of the things right now is I'm open to coaching and I've like tested that out. I've been getting therapy regularly to work on some of the deeper traumas. And I've like read this amazing book that's really popular on The Body Keeps the Score about how that works internally and how what some of the solutions are. I'm an avid psychedelic psilocybin user, but I use it a couple times a year max. But
Mhm.
I like really have found something valuable there personally. And what I'm seeing right now, it's interesting to me is I've been very open minded about like the ayahuasca journey, for example,
Mhm.
from like go to Peru, go to Colombia, get in the Amazon, do the thing with someone who's like been trained their whole lives in this
Mhm.
space. They know how to curate that in a proper way, but that's blowing up in North America, in Mexico, in the whole world, really. And the people that are practicing it or performing it are doing an amazing service to bring that to this other place, which I totally value. But I question whether or not they have the skills or connection or like understanding about how to help someone navigate through their process or even like the aftercare of like understanding what happened.
Mhm.
And so what I see happening is a lot of 20 and 30 somethings, not being an ageist, but like young people who don't have like a ton of life experience and definitely don't have a deep connection to these cultures, taking on this role, selling it as a service without me or other people understanding how if they're good at it or not. And so like to see and people are like self-promoting here an outrageous amount. So like I'm very off put by self-promotion. I would
Mhm.
prefer, and I think it's always going to be a better gauge of reality or value if someone recommends it because they had an amazing experience or a transformative experience. And how do you say psychedelic, just to be general, but like it's something that you're dealing with something really deep and internal, your subconscious.
Mhm.
You're awakening old traumas and triggers in those times, or dealing with something that's like brewing under the surface your whole life, but you haven't ever like opened that closet to see what's in there
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
your child protected you at some point in the past, and like the memories are trapped somewhere. You need to
Yeah.
go work on those, or reparenting. Like these concepts are important, but to put that in the hands of someone who doesn't have deep experience or connection to that substance, but also the training to help someone move through and navigate their own inner world is I want to
Yeah.
trust someone who has the experience. So it's hard
Mhm.
to navigate a world where everyone's a coach, everyone's an instant like I just did tantra training. Now I'm a tantra guru. And it's like, yo, you just announced last week that you're ending your training. Like, I'm not gonna pay you to like learn tantra. You just learned tantra. I don't want to pay you to
Yeah.
use my life as a studying process.
Yeah.
Keep studying until you have like reached the threshold, like a who's grading these people? Like, who's the person giving out the black belt in karate? You know, there's a reason why ancient cultures have this is embedded in their society, and you achieve certain roles and responsibilities at a certain time because of so much experience that
Yeah.
the guru, the person who's like lived it as like the wise old sage, can now say you're ready.
Yeah.
Where is that built in? I don't see that at all. I see people trying to make a quick buck off of someone else's trauma. And I'm a little bit off put and a bit like also cautious about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'm with you. If I don't ever hear anybody call themselves a guru ever again, I will feel like humanity's off to a good start. It's like, okay, finally, we're done with people thinking that they're gurus. It's
Mhm.
I do believe that there have been gurus who have graced this planet, but it's such an overused term and it's an abused term.
Mm.
Getting back again to the big spiritual umbrella, so many people want to wear that crown of guru and there are a lot of people who need to put that crown on somebody, who they respect to, if they're listening to somebody and more people start listening to them, it helps them to build this, that they've found something special. And anyway, it's the agency, the self-empowerment and the free will. It's like the more invested we are in organizations or in a particular person to save us for our salvation, whatever, it's like, there's still a lot of work to do on the individual level
Mhm.
to clear out some of that programming where, we feel like it's outside of us, that what we're seeking is going to come through somebody else for us.
This is a great point. The outside of you solution versus the internal work that it takes to
Yeah.
move forward. I, One thing I realized coming from a religious group where I was taught to pray from like 6 years old, and how to pray, what what it's for, how it works, like what kind of things you can pray about, and like okay, practice that throughout my youth. And I don't know that I found value, but I think when I started meditating, I was like, well, this isn't so different.
Mhm.
I'm trying to listen to what my internal voice is saying, and then it's waking a lot of interesting things, and I'm paying attention to those things. Okay, it's different than praying. And I've also done this thing I learned from someone who did Vipassana a number of times, where like I say a prayer, but not to an external being, but to my internal subconscious. That felt like I was rewriting my own operating system, to use
Mhm.
a computer analogy, like my own internal framework. Like I can tell it what to be
Mhm.
directly with the power of prayer, but not relying on something external, but relying on my internal world. And I feel like although prayer to a external deity is a way to focus your concerns and like speak them out, which is great for your mind because, okay, I said the thing that's I'm worried about. Now I can go do something about it. Oftentimes you're saying, help me with that thing. Like I need external help for that thing, but it's still focusing your mind. It's like, I feel like it's getting halfway there to pray to a God in terms of like helping you focus and like change your life. But if
Mhm.
you do it to yourself, you pray to the internal subconscious, then you're basically self-reliant. Okay, I've acknowledged the problem. Here are the things that I would like to do. Here's the version of myself that I would like to be. I'm this new version now. I'm
Mhm.
rewriting it right now in real time.
Yeah.
Is useful, more useful.
I love that. And to me, for my own personal, what resonates with me, like I do resonate with the concept of a higher self, so that there is like an eternal aspect of ourselves, that we have this human form that's like an expression of our eternal being, and that kind of has that 360 view of what's happening, where we have like this, a slice of what can be seen from a higher self perspective, but it's still part of us. It's still something that we get absorbed back into when the body dies. Um, so that's kind of that both, right? Because it's like more than just what's going on at the human level, but it's also part of that. It's a part of me, but it's also like a bigger part of me. When you're in Europe and there are all those towers, like church spires, where you can climb
Hmm.
and you can look down on the town that you're at. And when you're at the street level, you can see what you can see at street level. But when you go up in the tower, you have a whole different vantage point. You see the
Hmm.
whole town and like what all the different options are. And if you're looking down at somebody, it's like, oh wow, they could go that way. Don't go that way because there's a big, parade over there they can't see. They're going to get trapped if they go over there. That
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Yeah, with the first person view, you don't have quite as much clarity. or you don't see all
Yeah.
the options. Yeah. So that's your higher self view is what you're kind of describing as an
Right. Like
analogy.
I like to pray in that way where I'm like, okay, there's a part of me that goes beyond this human that is there to help me, but it's part of me. Like it is me, but it's more than what my consciousness
Mhm.
knows of. And it's higher than the subconscious, So I don't know. It's probably just wordsmithing things, but
I feel like there's so many different mind experiments, or
thought
what did
experiments.
Einstein do? Thought experiments. Yeah. So like the idea that like there's an eternal consciousness and it can choose parents to be the
Mhm.
soul that gets born into that child. Like that's an interesting thought experiment. And I guess my way of relating to that would be from my own personal experience using psychedelic mushrooms. Like shortly after leaving the cult, I was like, there's more to this world. I want to find out. And I did it really in a way that I'm happy about because it was like tied to nature with like close friends. But I think through that, it kind of opened my eyes to life on the planet and like how connected you feel to the planet
Mhm.
on that substance was really an important moment for me. And I used the substances multiple times. My way of seeing the world and relating to what you're talking about is that like all life is communicating to other things that are alive,
Mhm.
and we aren't so different. And my consciousness or the human consciousness, there's no way we're the first being on the planet to have that thing. Like
Mhm.
we are so similar in structure and biology to almost all other animal life of all the different kingdoms of species. So mushrooms themselves, like mycelium themselves, are like so important for the soil health, for plants to exist.
Mhm.
It seems like if you follow Stamets at all, they're deciding to kill a tree or to clear a valley or to encourage certain trees to grow and other ones not to grow. Like they're doing direct chemical communication through the roots, through the ribosome to trade ATP with nutrients that the tree needs because they're communicating what they need. And the tree's giving, through photosynthesis, sugars that the mushrooms need to exist. Like there's just so much interconnectedness
Mhm.
that I feel when I'm like that my consciousness is in communication with the consciousness of the life on the planet.
Mhm.
And that maybe it's not so much that I have a unique soul or I'm part of a super gigantic mega soul that has this one representation in this body, but the interconnectedness of the planet and life is so profound to me that I can see that becoming or having these similar religious themes or the way you described the higher self. Like we are a part of this ecosystem and we're all interconnected and we're all communicating, but our five senses are very limited. The field only allows us to see in this tiny little window or little binocular space. But there's this, like you said, there's a whole other perspective that you can have when you realize how profoundly intertwined we are. And I
Yeah.
also, like, part of me wants to know more about how to connect with that thing,
Mhm.
with my subconscious, with my conscious mind. There has to be more valued information. And I feel when I'm using those kinds of like mind opening substances that I'm getting way more information
Yeah.
in, in the present moment. And so that
Mhm.
information is always there. It's
Mhm.
just that allows you to it opens the filter up a little bit wider or changes
Right.
widens the lens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, this has been such a rich conversation, Scott. Thank you so much. Can you tell everybody how they can watch your films and connect with you?
Witness Underground is the name of the film. Witnessunderground.com is where you can find all the information. And the YouTube channel by the same name has a lot of other related content that's free. We're releasing season 2 for August right now. So that's all like every day, like a new video is coming out. And uh, so you follow there would be amazing because that helps. There's a ton of rich content on this type of topics that I've been making since 2016. So it's like a wealth of knowledge and interviews. And then it's available to watch right now at Patreon. So patreon.com/Witness Underground is the one place you can watch it right now, and that funds the project. It's $10. We're going to be releasing it on Vimeo on demand soon, and then it's going to go on a wider release in a month or two, which we're super excited about. So you should be able to watch it like on Tubi or some other paid-for ad-based service on
Okay.
your smart TV. But that's in the future. So right now, there's one way to watch it on Patreon. There'll be a couple more, and we'll be widening it out, and hopefully a full release before the end of the year.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Kara. It's a really fun conversation. I love being able to get this deep and so esoteric.
Yes,
You have an excellent
absolutely.
podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, Scott.